You're arresting an American citizen in front of her workplace. This is illegal.
After 12 hours of saving lives in the emergency room, Nurse Natasha Williams walked to her car, thinking only of sleep. What happened next in that hospital parking lot would expose a federal agent's darkest instincts, captured in real time by 4 body cameras that recorded every second of a nightmare she never saw coming. Born in Houston, raised in Texas, licensed, registered, and documented. Yet none of it mattered when Agent Marcus Brennan decided she looked suspicious. This is the true story of an American citizen who was handcuffed, detained, and transported to a federal facility, not for breaking the law, but for the crime of existing while black. And when the truth finally emerged, it would cost the government nearly $15 million and expose a pattern of abuse hidden in plain sight. Because sometimes the cameras meant to protect the powerful become the evidence that destroys them. This is Natasha Williams's story, and it's only the beginning. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room had burned into Natasha Williams's eyes for the past 12 hours. She moved through the final tasks of her shift with the mechanical precision that came from years of training, checking vitals, updating charts, ensuring the incoming nurse had everything she needed. Her scrubs were wrinkled and marked with the evidence of the night, a coffee stain on her sleeve, a small tear near the pocket from when she'd had to move quickly to assist with a trauma patient. It was 6:47 a.m. when she finally clocked out. The sun was just beginning to rise over Houston, casting long shadows across the hospital parking lot. Natasha felt the exhaustion deep in her bones, the kind that came from watching people fight for their lives, from making split-second decisions that mattered, from carrying the weight of other people's pain for hours on end. She walked toward her car, keys already in her hand, thinking about nothing except the shower she'd take and the bed that waited for her. The parking lot was mostly empty at this hour, just a few scattered vehicles belonging to the night shift workers who were now leaving, and the early arrivals for the day shift. The air was cool, almost pleasant, after the recycled hospital air she'd been breathing all night. Natasha didn't notice the black SUV parked 3 rows over, didn't see the 4 men inside watching the hospital entrance, didn't know that Agent Marcus Brennan had been sitting there for the past 40 minutes, studying every person who walked out, making judgments based on criteria he would never be able to articulate in a court of law. She was halfway to her car when she heard footsteps behind her, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Natasha turned, her nurse's instinct alert to anything unusual, and saw 4 men approaching. They wore tactical vests with ice emblazoned across the chest. Body cameras clipped to their uniforms blinked with small red lights. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you," the lead agent said. He was tall, white, with a rigid posture that suggested military training. His hand rested near his belt, not threatening, but present. Natasha stopped walking. Her heart rate increased slightly, but her voice remained calm. "Can I help you with something? We need to verify your identity and immigration status." Brennan's tone was flat, professional, final. She blinked, processing the words that didn't make sense in context. "I'm sorry, what? I'm a nurse here. I just finished my shift." "That's what we need to verify." He stepped closer, reducing the space between them. "Do you have identification?" Natasha felt a flutter of something in her chest, confusion mixed with the first stirring of fear. She reached for her hospital badge, which hung on a lanyard around her neck. "This is my ID. I'm Natasha Williams. I'm a registered nurse in the emergency department." Brennan barely glanced at it. "We need government-issued identification. Driver's license, passport, birth certificate." "I have my driver's license in my car." "Where were you born?" The question came sharp and sudden. Natasha felt the morning air suddenly colder. Houston, Texas." "I was born here. Can you prove that?" She looked at him directly, trying to understand what was happening. "My badge shows I work here. I can show you my license, my nursing credentials, whatever you need. But I don't understand why I'm being questioned." The other 3 agents had fanned out slightly, not surrounding her but positioned in a way that made leaving difficult. One of them shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. Another kept his expression carefully neutral. Brennan's jaw tighten. "We've received reports of individuals working at this facility using false credentials. We're conducting verification checks." "Reports from whom? About whom?" Natasha's voice remained steady, but her hands had started to tremble slightly. She pressed them against her sides. "I've worked here for 8 years. You can verify that with HR. You can call my supervisor." "This doesn't make sense." "We'll verify everything, but first, we need you to come with us for proper documentation review." The words hit her like cold water. "Come with us." Not a request, a directive. Natasha looked around the parking lot. A few other hospital workers were getting into their cars, oblivious. The sun continued to rise, indifferent. Everything looked normal except for this moment, this encounter that was rapidly becoming something she couldn't control. "Am I being detained?" she asked, and was proud that her voice didn't shake. Brennan's expression didn't change. "We're conducting a lawful immigration verification. You need to cooperate." "I am cooperating," Natasha said, hearing the slight edge creeping into her voice despite her efforts to stay calm. "But I'm asking a direct question. Am I being detained, or am I free to go? If you have nothing to hide, this will be quick." It wasn't an answer. Natasha felt her pulse accelerating. She'd read about situations like this, heard stories from friends and colleagues, but had never imagined it happening to her. Not here, not in the parking lot of the hospital where she'd worked for nearly a decade, not after a night of saving lives. "I want to show you my documentation," she said carefully. "My driver's license is in my car. My nursing license is valid and registered with the state of Texas. I can provide all of that right here." Brennan shook his head. "We'll need to verify authenticity. That requires taking you to our facility." "Based on what probable cause?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Natasha took a breath, forced herself to maintain composure. "You've approached me in a parking lot and demanded I prove my citizenship. I've told you I was born in Houston. I've shown you my work ID. What specific reason do you have to suspect I'm here illegally?" One of the other agents shifted again. Natasha caught his eye for a brief second. There was something there. Discomfort, maybe, or recognition that this wasn't right. But he said nothing. "We have reports," Brennan started. "Reports of what? Of me, specifically. Do you have my name on a list? A description? Anything concrete that connects me to whatever report you received?" The silence that followed was answer enough. The body cameras kept recording, their red lights blinking steadily. Somewhere behind her, a car door closed, life continuing normally while hers was being upended. "Ma'am, you're being uncooperative," Brennan said, and Natasha heard the threat implicit in the statement. "I'm going to ask you one more time to come with us voluntarily, and if I refuse—" His hand moved to his belt. "Then we'll have to detain you for further investigation." Natasha felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back hard. She would not cry, would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. "You're detaining me without cause. You're racially profiling. I'm a black woman leaving her job, and that's the only reason I'm being stopped. This has nothing to do with race. Then what does it have to do with?" Her voice rose slightly despite her best efforts. "Tell me what I did. What specific action made you approach me instead of any of the other people leaving this hospital?" Brennan stepped closer, invading her personal space. She could smell his cologne, see a small scar above his left eyebrow. "If you don't comply, this situation will become more difficult. Is that what you want?" The threat was clear now. Resist and face consequences. Natasha thought about her mother, about her brother Marcus, about the life she'd built here. She thought about the patients she'd cared for just hours ago, about the oath she'd taken to do no harm. "I'll come with you," she said quietly, hating the words even as she spoke them. "But I'm stating clearly that I do not consent to this. I believe this is an illegal detention. I want that on record." "It's all on record," Brennan said, gesturing to the body cameras. His tone suggested that he believed the footage would vindicate him, not condemn him. Natasha held out her wrists in a gesture that was both surrender and accusation. "Then let the record show that I'm complying under duress." Brennan pulled out handcuffs. "Turn around." "Are those necessary?" "I told you I'll cooperate. Standard procedure for transport. Turn around." Natasha did as ordered, feeling the morning sun on her face one last time before her hands were pulled behind her back. The metal was cold against her skin. Brennan tightened them more than necessary. She felt the bite immediately, the pressure cutting into her wrists. "Too tight," she said, trying to keep her voice level. "They're fine." Brennan's hand on her shoulder, guiding her toward the SUV. As they walked across the parking lot, Natasha saw Dr. Chen emerging from the hospital entrance. Their eyes met across the distance. Chen's expression shifted from morning fatigue to shock as she processed what she was seeing. Natasha, still in her scrubs, being led away in handcuffs by federal agents. "Natasha!" Chen called out, starting toward them. "Ma'am, step back," one of the other agents said, moving to intercept her. "She's a nurse here. She's an American citizen. What's going on? Federal matter. You need to stay back." Natasha wanted to call out, to tell Chen to contact someone, to help. But her throat was tight, and her eyes were burning, and all she could manage was to keep walking, keep breathing, keep her dignity intact, even as it was being stripped away in front of her colleagues. The handcuffs dug deeper into her wrists with each step. The back of the ice van had no windows. Natasha sat on the hard bench, hands still cuffed behind her, and tried to control her breathing. The panic wanted to come. She could feel it building in her chest, threatening to overwhelm her, but she fought it down, focusing on the physical sensations instead. The vibration of the engine, the smell of industrial cleaner, the pain in her wrists where the metal cut into her skin. Two agents sat across from her. Not Brennan, he was driving. These two were younger, and one of them wouldn't meet her eyes. The other stared at a point above her head, expression carefully blank. "How long is this drive?" Natasha asked. Her voice sounded strange in the enclosed space. "About 40 minutes, the uncomfortable one said, then seemed to regret speaking. 40 minutes. Natasha closed her eyes and tried to think practically. She needed to call her mother, needed to call someone, but her phone was in her bag, which had been taken and placed up front. She was completely cut off, being transported to an unknown location based on no evidence and no crime. The injustice of it burned in her chest. 12 hours ago, she'd been intubating a patient, helping someone breathe, using every ounce of her training to preserve life. Now she was handcuffed in the back of a van because an agent had decided, based on nothing but her appearance, that she didn't belong. "This is wrong," she said aloud. Neither agent responded. "You know this is wrong. You're detaining an American citizen without cause." The uncomfortable one shifted in his seat. Natasha watched him struggle with something, conscience maybe, or just basic human decency warring with chain of command. "Agent Brennan has authority to conduct immigration verifications," the other one said, his voice mechanical. "Based on what? What specifically made him suspicious of me?" No answer, because there was no answer. They all knew it. The body cameras were recording this too. The silence, the inability to justify what was happening. "I was born in Houston," Natasha said, speaking directly to the cameras she could see mounted on their vests. "I'm 36 years old. I've worked as a registered nurse for 14 years. I pay taxes. I vote. I have a passport. This is racial profiling, and you're all complicit in it." The uncomfortable agent looked like he might be sick, but he still said nothing, still did nothing. Just sat there while an innocent woman was being kidnapped by her own government. The detention center was a squat concrete building surrounded by chain-link fence. They pulled into an enclosed bay where other vehicles were parked. Brennan opened the back doors and gestured for Natasha to exit. With her hands cuffed behind her, getting out was awkward and painful. She nearly lost her balance, and Brennan grabbed her arm to steady her, not gently. Inside, the fluorescent lights were even harsher than the hospital's had been. A female officer behind a desk looked up as they entered. She took in Natasha's scrubs, her hospital badge still hanging around her neck, her exhausted face. "Processing?" the officer asked. "Immigration verification," Brennan said. "Need full background check, document authentication, database cross-reference." The officer's eyebrows rose slightly. "You want to uncuff her first? Once she's in processing." They led Natasha to a small room with a metal table and chairs. Only then did Brennan remove the handcuffs. Natasha brought her hands forward and looked at her wrists. The skin was red and already swelling with clear impressions from the metal. She rubbed them gently, trying to restore circulation. The processing officer sat down across from her with a tablet. Name: Natasha Marie Williams. Date of birth: March 15th, 1990. Place of birth: Houston, Texas. The officer's fingers moved across the screen, entering information. Natasha watched her face for any reaction. After a moment, the officer's expression shifted, subtle but there. Her eyes flicked to Brennan, who stood against the wall, arms crossed. "Social security number?" the officer asked. Natasha recited it. More typing, more screens loading. The officer's frown deepened. "I need to make a phone call," Natasha said. That's my right. After processing, Brennan said from his position by the wall. Processing for what? I'm an American citizen. This is illegal detention. The officer was scrolling through something on her screen now. Her expression had gone from professional neutrality to something else. Concern, maybe, or recognition that something was very wrong. Agent Brennan, she said carefully. Preliminary results are showing. Full verification, Brennan interrupted. I want every document checked. Birth certificate, social security, employment history, everything. Sir, the system is already showing that Ms. Williams has a valid U.S. passport, issued in Houston, renewed within the last 2 years. Her social security number is flagged as issued at birth. Her nursing license is active and current with the Texas Board of Nursing. Natasha felt a wave of vindication mixed with rage. I told you, Brennan's jaw tightened. Could be identity theft. I want deeper verification. The officer looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. Agent Brennan, every indicator here suggests this woman is exactly who she says she is. Then the verification will confirm that. His voice was hard, defensive. Continue processing. Natasha understood then. He'd made a mistake, a massive, public, recorded mistake, and he was doubling down rather than admitting it. I need to make a phone call, Natasha said again, her voice stronger now. You've verified my identity. You have no legal basis to hold me. I want to call my family. The processing officer looked at Brennan, then back at Natasha. You have that right. There's a phone in the next room. Brennan started to object, but the officer cut him off with a look that suggested she'd had enough of his overreach. Natasha was led to a small room with a payphone mounted on the wall. Her hands were shaking as she dialed her mother's number, and when she heard the familiar voice answer, something inside her finally broke. Mama, she said, and her voice cracked on the word. Mama, I need help. Natasha? Baby, what's wrong? Where are you? I'm at an ICE detention center. They arrested me. Federal agents arrested me at the hospital. The words came out in a rush, tears streaming down her face now. They said I'm here illegally. They wouldn't listen when I told them I was born in Houston. They handcuffed me and took me away. And Mama, I'm so scared. Slow down, baby. You said ICE, immigration. That doesn't make any sense. I know it doesn't make sense, but they took me anyway. They're saying they need to verify my identity, but I showed them everything and they won't let me go. Her mother's voice shifted from confused to commanding. Listen to me. Don't say anything else to anyone. Don't sign anything. Do you understand? I'm calling Marcus right now. We're going to get you out of there. Okay, Natasha whispered. Okay, I love you. You're going to be okay. We're coming. The line went dead. Natasha stood holding the receiver for a moment longer, drawing strength from her mother's certainty. Then she hung up and let the officer lead her back to the processing room. Brennan was on his phone now, speaking in low tones to someone. When he saw Natasha, he ended the call abruptly. Sit down. We're still waiting on federal database confirmation. For what? Natasha demanded. Your own officer confirmed my documents are legitimate. You have my passport on record. You have my birth certificate. What exactly are you waiting for? Proper verification takes time. No, proper verification took about 5 minutes. What you're doing now is called false imprisonment. His face darkened. You need to watch your tone. Or what? You'll arrest me again? You've already done that without cause. The processing officer intervened. Agent Brennan, I need to speak with you outside. They left the room. Through the small window in the door, Natasha could see them talking, the officer gesturing, Brennan shaking his head, his posture defensive. She couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear enough. The officer was pushing back, and Brennan was refusing to yield. Time moved strangely. Natasha sat alone in the processing room, watching the clock on the wall tick forward. 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:15. Each minute felt like an hour. She thought about her patients, wondered if they'd made it through, thought about Dr. Chen, about what she must be thinking, thought about the humiliation of being walked through that parking lot in handcuffs. At 8:43 a.m., the door opened and a new person entered, a woman in business attire with a supervisor's badge. She looked tired and irritated. Ms. Williams, I'm Supervisor Martinez. I've been reviewing your case. She sat down across from Natasha and folded her hands on the table. I need to understand something. Agent Brennan claims he had reasonable suspicion to detain you based on a tip about fraudulent workers at the hospital. But I've reviewed the tip, and it contained no names, no descriptions, no specific information. Can you help me understand why you specifically were targeted? Natasha looked at her directly. I was targeted because I'm black. That's the only reason. Martinez didn't flinch. That's what I suspect. objected. Ms. Williams, I want you to know that your documentation has been fully verified. You are exactly who you say you are. You should never have been detained. Then why am I still here? Because Agent Brennan is insisting on additional verification that frankly isn't necessary or justified. I'm overruling him. You're free to go. Natasha felt her breath catch. Just like that? Just like that. However, I need to inform you that your family has retained an attorney who's currently in our lobby demanding your release. Daniel Reeves. Do you know him? My brother must have called him. I don't know him personally. Well, he knows you now, and he's threatening legal action if you're not released immediately. Martinez stood. Come with me. Let's get you out of here. They walked through the facility corridors. Natasha could feel eyes on her. Other officers, other detainees, people wondering what her story was. In the lobby, she saw a man in a suit standing near the desk, briefcase in hand. He turned when they entered, and his expression shifted to relief, mixed with professional anger. Ms. Williams? He asked. She nodded. Daniel Reeves. Your brother Marcus contacted me. Are you all right? I don't know, Natasha said honestly. Reeves turned to Martinez. I need copies of all body camera footage from this incident. All of it, every angle, and I need them preserved with full metadata. Already being handled, Martinez said. Though I should tell you, Agent Brennan is objecting to the release of the footage. He can object all he wants. That footage is evidence of civil rights violations, and if it mysteriously disappears, that becomes obstruction of justice. Reeves pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to Martinez. I'll expect those files within 72 hours. Natasha looked at her wrists, which were now showing deep purple bruising alongside the red mark. Reeves noticed and pulled out his phone. I'm going to document those injuries. Don't move. The camera flash felt like punctuation. Evidence captured, truth preserved. 3 weeks later, Natasha sat in Daniel Reeves's office, staring at a stack of documents that represented her life reduced to legal evidence. Birth certificate, social security card, nursing license, tax returns going back 15 years, passport, employment records, everything that proved she existed, that she belonged, that she was exactly who she'd always said she was. The body camera footage came through, Reeves said, turning his laptop toward her. All 4 angles. Brennan tried to block it, claimed it was part of an ongoing investigation. Judge wasn't having it. Natasha watched herself on screen, tired, confused, trying to maintain dignity while being treated like a criminal. She watched Brennan dismiss her hospital badge without truly looking at it, watched him invade her space, issue threats disguised as warnings, watched the moment the handcuffs went on, saw her own face try to remain composed even as fear and humiliation warred beneath the surface. I can't watch this, she said, turning away. I understand, but a jury will need to. Reeves closed the laptop gently. Natasha, I've been doing this work for 23 years. I've seen a lot of civil rights cases. This one is as clear-cut as they come. Unlawful detention, Fourth Amendment violation, racial profiling, excessive force. We have it all on video from multiple angles with audio. We have witnesses. We have documentation showing you were telling the truth from the start. And we have Brennan's complete inability to articulate any legitimate reason for stopping you. What happens now? We file a federal lawsuit. We name the Department of Homeland Security and the individual agents. We seek compensatory damages for your suffering and punitive damages to send a message that this behavior has consequences. He paused. But I need you to understand what you're signing up for. This will be public. It will be difficult. They'll try to discredit you, dig into your past, make this as painful as possible in hopes you'll drop it. Natasha thought about the last 3 weeks, the nightmares that woke her at 3 a.m., the anxiety that spiked every time she saw a police car, the way she'd broken down crying in the grocery store when a security guard asked if he could help her find something, the therapist she was now seeing twice a week, the fact that she hadn't been able to return to work yet because the thought of walking through that parking lot made her physically ill. I want to do it, she said. Not for the money. I want them held accountable. I want it on record that what they did was wrong. Reeves nodded. Then let's make them answer for it. The lawsuit was filed on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, it was national news. Nurse detained by ICE despite being U.S. citizen. The headlines wrote themselves. Natasha's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, advocacy groups, people sharing their own stories of being profiled and detained. Her story had touched something raw and painful in the national consciousness. The hospital reached out through their attorney. They wanted to support her, wanted to provide a statement about her character and citizenship. Dr. Chen gave an interview describing what she'd witnessed, the shock of seeing a colleague handcuffed and taken away. Other nurses came forward with stories about Natasha, her dedication, her skill, the lives she'd saved. The government's first response was to offer a settlement, $50,000, no admission of wrongdoing, standard confidentiality agreement. Reeves called Natasha to relay the offer. "It's insulting," he said, "but I'm required to tell you about it. $50,000 for being kidnapped by my own government, for being handcuffed and humiliated and treated like a criminal when I'd done nothing wrong. That's what they think your dignity is worth. Tell them no. Tell them we're going to trial." The second offer came 2 weeks later, $250,000. Still no admission of wrongdoing. "No," Natasha said again. The third offer, $500,000. "They're scared," Reeves said. "They know that footage is devastating. They know a jury will see it and be outraged." "But Natasha, $500,000 is significant money. I need to make sure you understand what you're turning down." "I understand perfectly. This isn't about money. If I take their settlement and sign their confidentiality agreement, Brennan faces no real consequences. He gets to keep doing this to other people. The system doesn't change. I become just another person they paid to be quiet." She looked at Reeves directly. "How many others has he done this to?" Reeves pulled up a file on his computer. "We did some digging. Brennan has been with ICE for 9 years. In that time, he's been named in 7 complaints alleging racial profiling or excessive force. All were dismissed after internal investigation. We found 2 people willing to talk. Both were detained without cause. Both were citizens. Both were people of color. Neither had the resources to fight back legally." Natasha felt something harden in her chest. "Then we fight for them too." "Okay," Reeves said, and she heard respect in his voice. "Then we take this all the way." The trial began on a Monday morning in federal court, 14 months after that morning in the hospital parking lot. Natasha wore a navy suit and tried to ignore the cameras outside the courthouse, the reporters shouting questions, the protesters holding signs that said "Justice for Natasha" and "Citizenship is not a crime." The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with journalists, advocates, curious observers, and people who saw themselves in Natasha's story. She sat at the plaintiff's table beside Reeves and tried to breathe normally as the jury was sworn in. 12 people who would decide if her rights had been violated, if her suffering mattered, if the system could be held accountable. The government's attorney was a woman named Patricia Morse, 50s, grey suit, practiced composure. She stood for her opening statement and painted a picture of agents doing their jobs, following protocols, responding to legitimate concerns about immigration fraud. "This was a regrettable misunderstanding," Morse said, her tone sympathetic but firm. "But Agent Brennan was acting on credible intelligence about fraudulent workers at the hospital. Ms. Williams matched certain parameters of the investigation. The agents followed procedure, verified her identity, and released her when that identity was confirmed. No one is denying this was unpleasant for Ms. Williams, but unpleasant is not the same as unconstitutional." Reeves stood for his opening, and the temperature in the room seemed to change. "You're going to watch video footage from 4 different body cameras. You're going to see an exhausted nurse leaving her shift after 12 hours of saving lives. You're going to see federal agents approach her with no warrant, no probable cause, and no reasonable suspicion. You're going to hear Ms. Williams ask repeatedly what she did wrong, and you're going to hear Agent Brennan fail to provide any answer, because there was no answer. There was no crime. There was no investigation. There was only a black woman in a parking lot and an agent who decided that was suspicious enough." The first witness was Dr. Chen, who described seeing Natasha led away in handcuffs. "I've worked with Natasha for 6 years. She's one of the most dedicated nurses I've ever known. Seeing her treated like a criminal was shocking and completely unjustified." Then came the processing officer from the detention center. The database verification took approximately 4 minutes. Everything came back clean. Valid passport, birth certificate, social security number issued at birth, active nursing license, tax records going back years. I informed Agent Brennan immediately. He insisted on additional verification that, in my professional opinion, was unnecessary. Why would he insist on that? Reeves asked. The officer hesitated, then spoke carefully. I believe he realized he'd made a mistake and was trying to justify the detention retroactively. On the third day, they played the body camera footage. All 4 angles, synchronized, displayed on monitors throughout the courtroom. The audio was crystal clear. Natasha's voice asking for justification. Brennan's evasive non-answers. The moment he invaded her personal space and issued veiled threats. The handcuffs going on too tight. Her composed statement that she was complying under duress. Several jurors leaned forward, watching intently. One woman in the back row had tears in her eyes. A man in the front took notes furiously. The footage ran for 18 minutes, and when it ended, the courtroom was silent. Reeves let that silence hang for a long moment before speaking. You heard Ms. Williams ask what she did wrong? You heard Agent Brennan failed to provide an answer. That's because there was no answer. There was no crime. There was only prejudice. On the 4th day, Natasha took the stand. Reeves walked her through the timeline, the exhausting shift, the walk to her car, the moment she realized what was happening. She described the fear, the confusion, the humiliation of being handcuffed in front of her colleagues. How has this experience affected you? Reeves asked. Natasha took a breath. I have nightmares. I can't sleep. I had to take a leave of absence from my job because I couldn't face going back to that parking lot. I see a therapist twice a week. I have panic attacks when I see police cars. I feel like I don't belong in my own country anymore, even though I was born here, even though I've never lived anywhere else. Her voice cracked slightly. I saved lives that night. I did everything right, and I was still treated like a criminal. The cross-examination was brutal. Morse tried to make Natasha seem confrontational, tried to suggest she'd escalated the situation by refusing to immediately show identification. You could have simply shown your driver's license and avoided all of this, correct? Morse asked. I could have surrendered my constitutional rights to avoid being kidnapped by federal agents, yes, Natasha replied. But I shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to prove my citizenship just to walk to my car. Morse pressed harder, but Natasha held firm. By the time she left the stand, the jury had seen her strength, her clarity, and her refusal to accept blame for what had been done to her. Agent Marcus Brennan took the stand on the 5th day. He sat rigid in the witness chair, jaw set, posture defensive. Under direct examination from Morse, he maintained that he'd acted appropriately based on the intelligence he'd received, but Reeves's cross-examination dismantled him piece by piece. Agent Brennan, what specific information in the anonymous tip led you to approach Ms. Williams? The tip indicated fraudulent workers at the hospital. Did it name Ms. Williams? No. Did it describe her physically? No. Did it identify her vehicle, her schedule, her department? No, but so you had zero specific information connecting Ms. Williams to any fraudulent activity, correct? Brennan's jaw worked. I used my professional judgment based on the totality of circumstances. What circumstances? Explain to this jury what you observed about Ms. Williams that constituted reasonable suspicion of a crime. The silence stretched. Brennan's face reddened. The body cameras had captured this same silence in the parking lot, and now it was replaying in court. She was leaving the hospital at shift change, Brennan finally said. So were dozens of other people. Why her specifically? Another pause. I can't articulate the exact. You can't articulate it because there was nothing to articulate. You saw a black woman and decided that was suspicious. Isn't that the truth? No. I don't make decisions based on race. Reeves pulled up a document on the screen. You've been named in 7 complaints alleging racial profiling in 9 years. All 7 complainants were people of color. All 7 were detained without legitimate cause. You don't see a pattern. Those complaints were investigated and dismissed by your own agency. An agency with a documented interest in protecting its agents from liability. Reeves stepped closer. Agent Brennan, what was your exact thought process when you decided to approach Ms. Williams? Brennan's composure cracked. I used my instinct, my training, years of experience. Your instinct told you a black nurse in scrubs leaving a hospital was suspicious? I wasn't. He stopped, realizing he'd trapped himself. You weren't what, Agent Brennan? You weren't racially profiling? Because that's exactly what the evidence shows. Morse objected, but the damage damage was done. The jury had watched Brennan fumble, had seen him unable to provide any legitimate justification for his actions. Expert witnesses followed. A constitutional law professor explained Fourth Amendment protections and the requirements for reasonable suspicion. A psychologist specializing in implicit bias discussed how unconscious prejudices influence split-second decisions. A former ICE supervisor testified that Brennan's actions violated agency protocols and federal law. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and delivered the verdict with a steady voice. "We find in favor of the plaintiff, Natasha Williams, on all counts. We find that Agent Marcus Brennan and the Department of Homeland Security violated Ms. Williams's Fourth Amendment rights through unlawful detention and seizure. We find that this violation was committed knowingly and with deliberate indifference to constitutional protections." Natasha felt tears streaming down her face. Reeves squeezed her hand. "We award compensatory damages in the amount of $8 million for emotional distress, loss of dignity, and violation of civil rights." The forewoman paused. "We award punitive damages in the amount of $6.8 million to be paid jointly by Agent Brennan and the Department of Homeland Security to deter future violations of this nature." The courtroom erupted. The judge gavelled for order. Natasha sat in stunned silence, unable to process the magnitude of what had just happened. Outside the courthouse, Reeves addressed the cameras. "Today, a jury sent a clear message. Citizenship is not conditional on skin color. Constitutional rights apply to everyone, and when those rights are violated, there will be consequences." Natasha stood beside him and spoke briefly. "This was never about money. This was about accountability, about making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." The aftermath moved quickly. Agent Brennan was terminated within 72 hours. 2 of the other agents resigned. The 4th was reassigned to desk duties pending review. The Department of Homeland Security announced comprehensive reforms, mandatory implicit bias training, stricter protocols for citizenship verification, enhanced oversight of detention procedures, and requirements for preserving body camera footage. 6 months later, Natasha stood in a community center in Houston, addressing a room full of people who'd experienced similar violations. She'd used a portion of the settlement to establish a legal defense fund, providing resources for those who couldn't afford to fight back. "I know what it feels like to have your government treat you like you don't belong," she told them. "I know the fear, the humiliation, the anger, but I also know that change is possible, that accountability is real, that one person standing up can create ripples that reach further than we imagine." Her case was now taught in law schools and police academies. The body camera footage was used in training sessions on constitutional rights and implicit bias. Policymakers cited it in debates about immigration enforcement reform. Natasha eventually returned to nursing, though at a different hospital. The first time she walked through a parking lot in her scrubs, her heart raced and her hands shook. But she kept walking, kept breathing, kept moving forward. Some nights she still had nightmares about handcuffs and detention centers, but other nights she slept peacefully, knowing that her refusal to stay silent had changed something fundamental, that her pain had been transformed into protection for others, that the system, however flawed, had ultimately recognized her humanity and her rights. She kept the photos of her bruised wrists in a folder on her desk, not to dwell on the trauma, but to remember the truth, that dignity is not granted by authority, but inherent in existence, that justice, when fought for with courage and evidence and unwavering principle, can prevail, and that sometimes the most powerful act of resistance is simply insisting, despite everything, that you belong.